Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hello. Hello.
How's it going?
Aren't we fabulous?
Oh, yeah.
I might have to post a photo of my t-shirt because I am so in love with it. Thing 2 bought me a Piggly Wiggly t-shirt.
Very cute. And if you ever been to a Piggly Wiggly...
I know, I'm like, when will I ever get the chance? I don't even know. There aren't very many left.
Okay.
So...
Yeah, I had never heard of them, and then I went to visit a friend in Texas at one point, and they had them, and I was like, what is that? You don't look at that and think supermarket.
No.
I just was like, it's a supermarket. And I'm like, what? Is that for real, or are you like, yanking my chain? But yeah, I think they were just really I don't know if they were just in the South.
I think they were just in the South, because I encountered them in Arkansas.
Okay, and that shirt's from South Carolina, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. Fun times. I did not get any fun new shirts.
It took her a while to remember to bring it over, but, well, you know.
That's how it works.
Yes.
Listen, I have been cleaning my toilet with the grossest toilet brush right now because I keep forgetting. Somebody, I'm not going to say who, but I'm sure I could figure out who, must have clogged up the toilet and then tried to use the toilet brush to get it out.
Oh.
So here I go in to clean.
And it's...
Because I switch them out regularly. I buy new ones.
Yeah.
And I pull it out and I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And so as I'm cleaning, there's chunks of stuff falling off. Because it's basically like toilet paper bits dried and yellowed. And I'm just like, ugh. And so every time I go to clean, I'm like, God damn it, why can't I remember to get a new one? Because I don't want to order it from Amazon because I feel it's one of those things I can buy locally. But I'm like, I'm just going to have to order it from Amazon because I keep forgetting when I go to the store.
Do you not use Alexa for your shopping list?
No.
Oh, we do. We don't have her buy stuff. We just say,
No.
Alexa, put blah, blah, blah on the shopping list.
No, I think I tried to do it once and then it wouldn't let me clear out the last one. So then it was just adding stuff and I had all this...
It took me a while to figure that out because you have to say, Alexa. You can't say delete because Alexa just goes, what the fuck is that? So you have to say, Alexa, clear the shopping list. And then it has to come back and say, you want me to clear all items from the shopping list. And you have to say yes. And you can't shout it because you've said it 6 times already. Yeah, okay, so there is that.
Yeah, see, my patience level with all that. I tried it one time and said, fuck all this. I have pads and I usually write it down on the paper. But with work stuff being crazy, I have done none of that right now. Yeah.
I get it.
So... I haven't written in like 2 months, except I forced one evening after I did some work, and I've sat there for probably, I don't know how long, with like a movie playing, and I think I wrote 150 words. And for some people, that's normal. For me, if I sit down to write, it's going to be thousands of words.
Yes.
I do not ever sit down and don't write thousands of words, because that's how I work. I work in spurts. And so that just... So, I'm going on vacation soon. I'm going to work during that vacation because I have a deadline during that vacation.
Well.
But that was my choice, wasn't it?
Wait, when are you going on vacation?
Well, this won't air till afterwards, so I'll go ahead and tell you. So, the first week of August.
Oh, nice.
Just to Arizona, because the kids start school on the 16th. And the next week after, so the second week of August is my anniversary.
Right.
And I didn't want to go that week, and I had appointments I didn't want to move.
Right.
So I had 1 week we could go before school started because, again, senior, and I'm like, we may not get to go on. You don't know what's going to be happening next summer. It could be laid back. He's kind of anti-college right now. They're both kind of like, we'll go learn a trade first. Girl child's big idea now is that she's going to be a nurse, but she wants to be a nurse.
Which is great, but I'm like, no, that you have to go to college for that.
No, she knows.
Okay.
But she wants to get some sort of job. She was like, I will pay my own way through college. And I was like, well, first of all, you both have excellent grades and neither one of you should not be able to get a scholarship of some sort.
Yeah.
Because they're incredibly smart. That's why. So they should. And then I said, you know what? I bet that there are scholarships for autistic adults who want to go, and she was like, I will not do that. She said, I will give a scholarship based on my merits.
She is your child.
She is. Yes. And she said, or not at all. And I was like, okay. All right then. So yeah, I don't know what it's going to be like next year, but I kind of had this. Our summers been kind of torn apart. We weren't able to make any plans, and I finally said, that's it. We're just going to do this. It's a simple trip, It's going to be to the Grand Canyon and to Sedona, where I've never been, and to the Starman Crater. Listen, I posted how excited I was about that, and there were people that agreed.
Well, it was funny because I read that and I thought you were going to do that like on your way home from Vegas.
Oh.
In November, and I was like, wow, that's a long time to sustain this level of excitement.
Right? No.
So I was like...
We are going to try and go to like arches and stuff like that on the way back from Vegas. I'm taking... Jeffrey's going to have to bring my camera.
Yep.
And all my stuff. I've wanted to like photograph those places so bad for so long. When people post beautiful pictures, I look at them and I go, I would like to go to that place and take my own version of that picture. And Jeff's like, you could just, that picture, you use that however you like to look at it. And I'm like, no, it must be my picture. Just like, so because his work is surrounded on two sides by Ute Valley Park. They get all kinds of wildlife there at work. And he was always, every spring or whatever, it's like, oh, the fawns are back. Because then I never, ever got to see a fawn. So then the other day, Gabriel's on the back porch and he comes in and he goes, if you want to grab your camera, there's a deer in our backyard, because he knows me quite well. And I was like, oh, okay. And I went back there and I was like, that's a mom. Because first of all, her poor little ribs were showing through and she had the little hanging down. And I was like, oh, that's a nursing mom. And I'm looking around. I'm like, I need to know if the fawns are back here. We need to not run to the fawns. No, they're not in the backyard. And I'm like, huh. So I go out front and I'm walking along and I see them across the street. And one of them's very serious and watching me. And the other one is just gamboling for all its life. I should have got it on video. It was adorable. It was just like, spring, spring, spring. And then you'd see the one that never got out of my sight. And the other, and again, I did not approach these. I had a telephoto lens and I was across the street. But, yeah, just the one boing into your presence and then boing out of the presence. So I took a couple pictures of the little one staring at me, and it had like this tuft of fur the other one didn't have between its ears. So cute. And then like I'm sitting there and the other one finally walks away and they're out of my sight and I'm like, okay. And then I was like, I'm not going inside till I know they're reunited. So then I sat out there and it was amazing, I'm telling you, because first I see them start walking out. The little fawns are coming. They come back around the house that they're behind and they walk out the fence and I hear something over to my right and here comes mom at the exact same time they exited. Wow. I had not heard any like verbal phrase, but they came out at the exact same time and it was so cute because the little gamboling one, they saw mom and then they were like, and they perked up and then they boop, 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 and they sprung across the street to mom. And then they nursed, and I got those pictures. So not only did I finally get fawn pictures, they're not great because I refused to like make them uncomfortable, and I wasn't gonna walk around to a better angle because I didn't want her to stop letting them nurse or whatever. I was like, I feel like they're taking way more milk than you just got out of grass out of my backyard. She just ate. I could see her ribs, and they're like more. But they were very.
That is nursing in a nutshell.
I know it is. Little leeches.
Sucking the calcium right out of your bones.
That's right. So yes, that made me very happy to finally get fun pictures. And then to get to see them nursing was fucking adorable. I was like, thank you, Mother Nature. I needed that.
Yes. Well, I finally did something we've been talking about on the podcast for I don't know how long since I first saw the remake. I finally sat down and reread Firestarter.
Yeah.
It was so hard to get a hold of.
Oh, really? I had a copy.
Well, I thought of that when I got home last time. I was like, why the fuck didn't I just ask Shannon, do you have a copy I could borrow? But I got it from the library. I got an ebook from the library. And the second movie does not do it justice. Not even close. So
the stuff with, what is it? Oh, Gray Eyes played him. What is
Rain Man?
Rainbird.
Rainbird.
Okay, Rain Man. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 matches. Yeah. Was that all way off from the book?
That was like a 180.
But they did we see her getting tortured even if it was just flashbacks?
Her or her mom?
Sorry, the mom is who I mean. Because I have a vivid thing about the fingernails in my head.
In the book, you don't see it.
But they tell you.
But they tell you about it because because it starts, they're on the run. It's a really good So if you're a writer...
So that's true. The first movie is...
So it opens when they're on the run in New York City.
Uh-huh.
And they get away for a little bit. And in the midst of all this, he's running down, but he's also reminiscing. He's remembering. And he remembers he got out of class early. I can't remember why. When his wife was killed, nobody was home. Nobody was home. And he thinks that's what triggered it. All of a sudden, Charlie wasn't home, and they thought he was the company. Was that what it was called? The company?
Yeah.
Thought they were getting ready to run. So they go to the house, and they pull out the wife's fingernails. Well, he's walking all over the house, and he can't find his wife. He knows where his daughter is. His daughter's at a friend's house. So
he opens the
laundry room.
Yes.
And the body falls out, and that's one of the things he notices is that her fingernails have been pulled out.
Okay. Yeah.
Not all of them, but... they had to pull out X, and he says
they were clearly torturing her with it
to find out where her daughter was. Yes, yeah, and they totally. I don't know why. Yeah, I don't know why they did what they did with Rainbird, but also, do you remember how the book ends?
Yeah,
she walks into the offices of the Rolling Stone to get the story out.
Okay, the first one ends with that too. The first movie ends. So interestingly, it really does sound like the first movie tried to stick very close to the book.
Now, the one thing, if anybody hasn't read it and they read it now, it's dated. It's very dated because there are no cell phones.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference, one of the biggest differences. And there aren't as many cameras. There aren't as many, things like that.
Right.
So I thought the story held up. I thought it was worth a reread. And now I can say, no, I did not like this. I thought I enjoyed the second movie, but I was wrong.
Okay.
They did though. They really shortened it up because they were held in captivity long enough for her dad to become dependent on drugs.
Yeah.
And start getting fat.
Yeah.
Whereas in that second movie, they were in captivity.
It was one day.
Yeah, felt like 15 minutes. They were
because I had watched the Drew Barrymore one before, and yeah, they're there for. I mean, even there, it's probably. I don't know what the passage of time is. I think there's some passage of a time implied because Rainbird is getting. He's coming in as her janitor.
Yes,
to win her over.
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, so yeah. And so they're there, and the dad's zonked out on the drugs, and then it's not until he starts kind of trying to spit them out and get his powers back, because the drugs hold his powers down.
Yes, he pushes. That's the phrase he uses, pushes. He pushes himself.
Okay.
And that's how he stops craving the drugs.
Gotcha.
Because he could sit there and logically say, I need to stop taking these drugs, but he craved them.
Does she go back to the old couple on the farm?
Yes.
Okay, so that's accurate too. That's in the first movie.
Yeah, she goes back.
And honestly, folks, I know these are spoilers, but this book was written in like the 70s. And the movie was made in like the 80s. It was
published in 1980.
Okay.
So I looked it up.
The Drew Barrymore one is clearly sometime in the 80s.
Yeah, early 80s.
Because we're not that far apart in age, so.
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't remember. I need to go back and rewatch the first movie, but that one was much more accurate to the book.
Okay.
And I'm not saying
it is still a good movie.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it didn't deserve a remake, but why don't you remake the story? And if you want to write a new story, write a new story.
That's what, I don't understand sometimes. I'm like, don't use this as a vehicle, write your own story.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And then we're not judging it based on the original story or the previous movie made. So you actually get less judgment about it. Whatever. I don't get it. That's okay. Hey,
what you going to talk about? Yes.
Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try.
Do it.
Okay, I am talking about Il Mostro de Firenze. Guess what, guys? I don't speak Italian, and I keep wanting to apply the principles of Spanish because they're both related languages, but I know that it's different, so you're going to get some kind of gobbledygook.
What is it in English?
What? The Monster of Florence.
Thank you. I write this in my book. I have where I keep track of when we do what.
On the evening of August 21st, 1968, a 6-year-old boy knocked on a farm door in Signa, Italy at 2 a.m., begging to be let in. He said he needed a ride home where his father was sleeping and that his mom and uncle were dead in the car. Upon opening the door, the boy was found to be barefoot. When the police were called, they discovered the car 2 kilometers away, parked at a lover's lane, and just, there were a bunch of those in Florence, Italy at the time, and I'll explain why later. The boy's mother, Barbara Locci, I saw it pronounced Loxy somewhere, and I was like, what? I'm going with Locci. I like it better, and it makes me want pasta. Was a 32-year-old housewife. The man in the car, who the boy had referred to as his uncle, we're going to put some quotes, was one of her many lovers. Uncle, though, is also said a polite form of address for, yes. And he was a 29-year-old married father named Antonio Lo Bianco. Barbara was well known for having lovers, to the extent that locals called her Ape Regina, which is Queen Bee. The two had been shot, like everybody knew. They talked about it. They just knew she was just fucking everybody.
All right.
She was a happy woman. Or a very sad one. I don't know. The two had been shot. A lot. Stories vary on whether the boy actually walked those 2 kilometers or if the killer picked him up and drove him to the nearest houses. Like, some of the articles about it were like, he actually took the young boy and threw him over his shoulder and took him to his car and drove him to this farm. But the thing is, the police were like, he had bare feet and he had to have walked 2 kilometers at night down like this rugged kind of road, right? And his feet weren't messed up from what I could find. So it didn't sound like he'd walked. It sounded like somebody drove him from it, dropped him off, and let him run up and knock on this door. But he said, at first he said he walked. Then he said, no, my uncle brought me. Then he said, no, I walked. But he had just been in a car when 2 people got shot to death.
Yeah. One of which was his mother.
Yeah. So, honestly.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Stefano Mele, Barbara's husband, was charged with the murders and sent to prison for 14 years. He actually admitted to the crimes some part into the questioning, and he said he was tired of being humiliated by her. In the past, she had even moved one of her lovers into their house.
Oh, that's bold.
And when you see, I will post a picture of him. He's a tiny man. He just is. So, he just quietly took his shit, and then people gave him shit about taking all of this. So anyway, he remained in prison until I think 1981 or 82. I couldn't find his actual release date. So I was just going by what murders he was in prison for, basically.
Oh, God.
On September 15th, 1974, when he was still in prison, another couple was shot at a lover's lane. This time it was 2 teenagers, 19-year-old Pasquale Gentilecore and 18-year-old Stefania Pettini. This time it was in the town Borgo San Lorenzo. Now, all the towns I'm going to talk about are kind of bordering Florence there. They're kind of like, they're called municipalities of Florence. Okay. Which I think is the same thing as the little towns floating around Denver. That
Suburbs.
Yes. They had been blindsided while having sex. They were killed while having sex in the Fiat.
That's just not right.
It's so mad. But that's the thing. People are kind of at their most exposed doing that and going to the bathroom and showering. Okay? Those are... But, yeah, they were both shot. Again, it's a bunch of shots through the windows of the car. Stefania had been stabbed 97 times, mostly in the pelvic region and the breasts. And the stabbings, not the 3 gunshots, were thought to be her cause of death.
Oh, my God.
A grapevine had been shoved up her privates post-mortem. Her purse was found nearby, dumped out, and rifled through.
A grapevine.
A grapevine. Yeah.
All right.
In my head, that was softer, and then I was looking, and they're like, it was something branchy. Mm-hmm. So, anyway. I will tell people that, though I will not be posting them, there are some crime scene photos online. Her crime scene photo is there, but she's covered with a blanket, so all you see are her feet spread out. But, so I thought about posting that one because it wasn't like a drastic one, but I won't. I'll stick to that rule. And you are welcome to go look it up, though. Okay, June 6, 1981, 21-year-old Carmela De Nuccio and 30-year-old Giovanni Foggi, an engaged couple, were shot to death in Scandicci and discovered by a police officer in a walk with his son. He saw a car parked there, and then there was a purse with everything strewn about, because this would be consistent in the future, so I'm not going to mention it every time. They don't know it was missing, and I thought it was probably a trophy type thing. But anyway, then he went to investigate, and he finds the driver, because he's on the driver's side first, and he's been shot and stabbed. And then he finds Carmela's body about 20 yards away. She'd been dragged out of the car. Her vagina was removed. And I tried to look around and make sure it was actually her vagina, not her labia, because most people call everything the vagina. But then I was finding stuff saying her vagina was excised, and so it sounds like actually like they were like cutting out the inside, from what I could tell, not cutting off the outside. So there you go.
I have the most horrified look on my face.
Yes. They were able to determine there was a certain kind of knife had been used that has a notch in it, and so they felt that it was a scuba knife that it had been used. And the same notch would be present in future.
Of course.
Things. And again, her purse dumped on the ground. That's what the cops saw. Lovers' lanes were very popular in the area because in Italian family life, young people typically continue living with their families until they get married. So instead of having sex in their parents' homes, most people would instead head out to these parking areas. And so it was like back lanes by farm field or orchards and stuff like that from the pictures I was looking at. I always picture a lover's lane. It's like that Hollywood, that parking spot up high. Yes. That's what we always see, and maybe they're consistently like that. I know some of the ones around here are. Because, you know what, though? Have Jeep will travel when you're a teenager. I'm just going to say that. We knew all kinds of places. But, yeah, so the pictures I was seeing, these weren't cliffs. These were just dirt roads past farms and stuff that would be private. Yeah. But there were also well-known ones where people were known to go. Because even, fascinatingly, it seems like there was a whole culture. There was the culture of the people having sex there. And then there were voyeurs they'd show up with even like photography and video or like audio recording stuff. And this pissed me off. But they were called, it was like Indianos. I took it out of here. And they said, like Indians, because they sneak around in the dark. And I was like, fuck you. Fucking Italian racist motherfuckers.
I was
even in Italy, they're racist against Native Americans. But then I was like, spaghetti westerns. The only thing they've seen, is the stupid. That frustrated me so much. That article was by Douglas Preston. We're going to get into that further. And Preston and Child.
Those were the words forming.
You're going to recognize two things that relate to the writing world in this. Okay. Wow. In the case of Carmela and Giovanni, one of these voyeurs mentioned the murder to his wife the next day before the bodies had even been discovered. So.
Okay.
He ended up being arrested and spent 3 months in jail for the murders. But, luckily for him, unluckily for others, the next murder would occur far more quickly than the previous ones had and resulted in his release because he couldn't have done it.
Because they're like, well, we didn't know.
I never found out, though, if he was like, I saw the guy or whatever. Nothing about that, so I guess he didn't. So maybe he just found the bodies? I don't know.
Left them?
He was an ambulance driver. He was a paramedic. That blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? Then what? Anyway, there was no further information on that. And I'm like, no, I need more information. How are you a paramedic and you either witness a crime or stumble upon bodies and then you're like, I'm just going to go home and tell my wife over coffee that I was out there being a pervert waiting for lovers. Anyway.
Yes.
October 23rd, 1981, 26-year-old Stefano Baldi and 24-year-old Susanna Cambi, another engaged couple, were shot in Calanzalo. Once again, the female victim was dragged from the car, her vagina excised with the same type of knife. They were both found to have lived through the gunshots and been killed by stabbing. Unlike in other crimes, Stefano was also outside the car when they found him. There is a crime scene photo of him, too. Again, covered by a blanket.
Okay.
The worst crime scene photo I saw was of Pasquale Gentacore, because it's him bloodied in the car. It appeared he had gotten himself there. He had not been dragged, so the killer was staying consistent. Okay. Yes. He's just a couple feet from the drive. There was a tiny little embankment, kind of downsloped, and he kind of went boop, 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 and he tumbled down. So a size 44 shoe print was left behind in the mud, pointing to a tall suspect. There were no fingerprints. There was nothing. They felt he was wearing surgical gloves. So they had no evidence. And he was not raping the women with his own member, at least. So there was nothing. There was just nothing.
Wow.
Interestingly, both Susanna and Stefania had reported to friends that a strange man was following them before the crimes. June 19th, 1982, another engaged couple, 22-year-old Paolo Mainardi and 20-year-old Antonella Migliorini, had just finished having sex when they were shot in Monte Spertoli. At some point, Paolo managed to turn the car on, put it in reverse, and step on the gas, sending the car in reverse across the road where it fell into a ditch. And then what they were able to figure out then, he had turned on his headlights too, is then the headlights were shot out. So the guy must have just walked across the road because it was facing him, right? And shot out the headlights and then continued shooting until, possibly because it was a high traffic area, the killer fled without mutilating Antonella. And there were witnesses to a car leaving at a few of these.
Okay.
So Paolo was still alive when they discovered the bodies in the morning, but he never regained consciousness and he died in the hospital later that day. The assistant DA used that, though, and asked the press to spread a lie for her and say he had described the suspect before he died because she wanted to see if she could trip him up. Now that she's called chief prosecutor, assistant DA, and stuff like that, I don't think they call them DAs. I think this person was Americanizing it, but she was a prosecutor. Okay. And so there were so many things I had to cut out of this that went into the dynamics of Italian law, which I'm fucking terrified, by the way, of Italian law. And it's not because of this story. It's because I've already seen stuff about they just decide you're guilty and that's it.
Oof.
And then they will do whatever they can to get, terrifying. Okay. But instead of it tripping the suspect up by a bunch, what the suspect did was get one of the ambulance driver's phone numbers and start calling the ambulance driver to say, what did he say before he died? Apparently he'd get 3 phone calls. At first the person said they were a doctor and they wanted to know what he'd said. And he was like, what? No. And he goes, okay, I'm the killer and I want to know what he said to you. Yeah. How freaky if you're if the paramedic, Up until this point, the original murder of Barbara and Antonio in 1968 had been considered a separate crime from all the ones, because it was 8 years or something. I'm not going to.
Right.
So they were separate. It's not the same thing. Nobody even thought of it. But in July 1982, a letter was received by the police from un cittadino amico, or a friendly citizen, that urged them to look into that original crime again and included a clipping about that first crime. So by that time, Stefano Mele, Barbara's husband, was out of prison. He was living in a halfway house. He was a fucking mess. By the way, he walked and mumbled and... Yeah, it was determined the same gun had been used in those crimes, a .22 Beretta. And it was also clear that it was the same gun because it had a messed up firing pin, so it left a specific mark on everything. Yeah. September 9th, 1983, the killer murdered 2 tourists there from Germany, 24-year-old Wilhelm Friedrich Horst Meyer and 24-year-old Jens Uwe Rusch in Galuzzo. There are so many languages in this. There's a French one soon. Much to the killer's surprise, they were both men. One had long blonde hair, and so it's figured he had seen that. Now, from what I could find, they were sleeping when he came upon them. They were not having sex. So whether they were just they were college kids, whether they were just college friends who were traveling and were asleep in the Volkswagen bus, or they were gay lovers is disputed.
Okay.
No mutilation occurred, of course, because he wanted to mutilate women, not men. So a bunch of them said that there was what was it? It was how did they keep describing it? A homoerotic pornography magazine or something. And I was like, so gay porn then. Okay. And it was torn up. But then some of them didn't say it. So I'm like, I feel like that's something somebody made up.
I feel like two German tourists in a minibus
sleeping
could just
on a
be
back lane.
Two buddies
who didn't want to pay for a hotel.
Yeah.
Or, you know, couldn't. They were college students.
Yeah.
But even if they were gay lovers, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay. Either way, two dudes in a car got killed and the killer was like, fuck. So, because then he didn't get his jollies off. See, this is, for these types of killers, sexual excitement because they can't get it another way. Right? So, yeah, very frustrating. July 29th, 1984, 18-year-old Pia Gilda Rontini and 21-year-old Claudio Stefanacci were killed in Vicchio. This time, not only did the killer take her genitalia, but he also removed her left breast and took it with him. As with two of the women before, Pia had mentioned a strange man bothering her at work, and people afterwards reported that there was a man following the couple when they went out for ice cream. So it would be established that he was a very organized killer.
Wow.
And that sort of thing, he was possibly following them around ahead of time. And it looks like he was targeting the females. Or I could see men kind of being oblivious to being followed around because they're not on alert like women are.
Right.
So it could go either way. I don't know. But since he was clearly after hurting the women the most.
Right.
Yeah. Her body had more than 100 stab wounds. Finally, late at night or early in the morning, there's some argument over when it occurred, and that was a problem because they couldn't get it down. Like, some even said it was the previous night. So, if you had a suspect who had one of the days and had an alibi but not the other, it became very complicated. And all of this did become very complicated. It's part of why the story's so long. Anyway, September 7th or 8th, 1985, there were two more deaths. 36-year-old Nadine Moriot and 25-year-old Jean-Michel Kravich.
Easy for you to say.
Kravitchvili, I'm going to say. Kravitchvili. Okay. I practiced this last night and then just lost it just then. I have said too many things and my tongue is twisted. They were French tourists camping out. The killer entered their tent while the couple were having sex with... So there's a reason I'm describing this and you'll see. Jean was on his back. Nadine was on top with her back to the flap. Nadine had been shot 4 times and died immediately because it was like head and upper torso. But Jean, he was actually a sprinter. Like, that's what he did. And due to his position during the shooting, none of the shots were fatal. Now, he was hit by 3 of the bullets, I think. But again, it was like arm, here, face. Right. He got hit in the mouth with one. Oh. But it didn't like go into the brain type thing.
How can you have... I mean, kudos to him, but just imagine you're laying there having sex,
a great time.
1 second, the next minute you've got a bullet in your mouth. The woman you've just been having sex with is brutally bleeding out, and yet the survival instinct kicks in.
Yeah,
and you just fucking book it.
That's some flight.
That is some, yeah.
So he did manage to get out of the tent, past the guy, and run 30 yards before the killer caught him. He was shot. I'm sure it would have weakened him. And the killer sliced his throat. And it was deep. The killer then went back to stab and mutilate Nadine. Because, of course, he did. This time, he sent a note to the state prosecutor. It's that same person I mentioned before who they called the DA and the one. And I was like, nah. Because it was the same name. And it was a taunting note, and it had Nadine's nipple in it. So this prosecutor ended up retiring. She was very traumatized by this.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. It was, I think she stuck around for a little bit. But anyway, the note arrived right around the same time that someone who had gone out into the woods to pick mushrooms found the bodies. So this all kind of went book at the same time. As bad as the murders were, the legal response was full-on fuck-uppery. That would involve interagency bullshit that I decided not to go in. There's 2 forms of police. There's there's like a military level. Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of a local level. But unlike the FBI that comes in very specifically, if requested or interstate or yada yada, you know, it's this or that. Doesn't seem to be anything like that. So they fight. They're like what the FBI and cops are in movies that actually isn't really accurate. Right. So that there was politics involved, there was showboating, and at this point in time, over 100,000 men have been investigated. More than a dozen were held as suspects or arrested and prosecuted for the death. There's like at least 6 that were prosecuted for this because they just, this isn't it? Okay, let's do some more. These crimes became so internationally famous that Thomas Harris's book Hannibal was based on them. And he actually stayed out there for a time. He attended some of the courtroom antics for some of this. Like, he did full-on research for Hannibal from this. And if you want to look into it, it says, like, there's a police inspector in Hannibal, and he dies kind of horribly, hanged off of, like, a historic building in the area or something like that. And the real guy's still alive, the guy he based this on. And his character in the book was, like, the Clouseau of, this poor guy, and he knew it was about him. So anyway, it's interesting if you guys want to look up that connection. Again, I had to cut so much out. One of the big problems with that, the first case being considered, is that it was separate and solved, so they didn't have whatever stuff to add to that. But Stefano Mele hadn't made that any easier. During police interviews in the beginning, he threw random relatives under the bus. After he admitted to doing it, he went back on that, and then he was like, no, it was my cousin or whatever. Jesus. So when police connected the crimes and saw they continued while Stefano was in prison, they didn't think he was innocent. No, they just decided that it had been a mass killing with his Sardinian relatives helping him, and that in that original crime, and that now they were continuing. One of them had liked it so much they were continuing with the crime, and was felt that the Sardinian clan had helped him kill his wife to preserve the family's honor.
Okay.
It gets better. Through a twisted variety of mental gymnastics, a guy named Francesco Venci was arrested. Then the 1983 murders happened while he was in prison. Instead of releasing him, it was assumed that it was members of a gang he belonged to, trying to make him look innocent. So then they went and arrested Stefano's brother, Giovanni, and his brother-in-law, Piero Mucciarini. They were in custody when the 1984 murders happened, all three of them, and this time all were released. Because it couldn't be them, and they were like, pfft. So once they were out, it was figured it must be Francesco's brother, Salvatore Venci, so now he was arrested.
Oh my God.
Both he and his brother, the first one arrested, had been lovers of Barbara's. I wouldn't doubt all of them were, from the sound of it. Like, there were so many people that were like, this person was tried because he was Barbara's lover, and this person wasn't.
Because he was Barbara's lover.
Yep. Salvatore actually had a rocky history. His wife had died in a fire, and it had been ruled a suicide. But talk among, the folks said he had actually murdered her. Desperate, the magistrate that was working his way through all the Sardinians in this family tried to charge him with his wife's murder instead of the Loci murder, figuring once he had him for that, it would be easier to get him for these other murders, but he had no evidence. She died in a fire. There was no evidence except for word of mouth. So it failed. Salvatore went free, and the chief prosecutor basically said, no more Sardinians. Stop it.
Oh, Jesus.
Their theory now was that Stefano had in fact killed his wife and her lover, then disposed of the gun, and someone else had gotten his gun and started these murders, figuring out it was his gun so that they could be tied together. But, nope. What did I say? Mental gymnastics.
I'm like, my brain doesn't bend that way.
Theirs did. Anonymous tips led police to a man named Pietro Pacciani, who had been convicted of raping and abusing his daughters. He had also, in 1951, murdered a salesman that was seducing his girlfriend. He had raped her next to the body after he killed the man. This is not a good man. Interestingly, he had said that when he had caught them, she'd been bearing her left breast for the man, and it had been too much for him. Why do I point that out? Because the last two victims, he took their left breast. His house was torn apart, and in the garden, an unfired Winchester Series H bullet was found. This was the same type of bullet used in the murders. To me, that's not a rare type of bullet. Winchester was international. These ones are actually made in Australia.
Okay.
So, produced in Australia. The ones found at crime scenes had been determined to be from the same box, but no box was found on his property. A box came in 50, by the way. With that in his history as the only evidence, he was convicted in 1994 of the murders. But when it went to appeals, the prosecutor refused to prosecute him, saying there wasn't enough evidence. This is bullshit. You can't do this. That's not what I'm here for.
There's a bullet on his property. That's not...
buried in his garden. Oddly, one bullet buried in his garden. So this led to him being acquitted, and he got out of prison in 1996. It was his first trial that Thomas Harris was at through the proceedings for research for the book. The Supreme Court ordered yet another trial for Pietro after this. They were like, nope, we're going to try him again. But he died in 1998 before they could follow through. There are accusations that he was murdered to keep him quiet. So some reports just said he'd had a heart attack, and a bunch of others said he was found with his pants down and shirt up, and it was still originally thought to be a heart attack, but it turned out he had some weird mix of like asthma medication that had killed him in his system. So anyway, who knows? He either had a heart attack or he died from some weird mix of shit he took, or somebody murdered him. There's so many theories about him. It's interesting to note that the military branch of police, the Carabinieri,
Yes.
asked the FBI's behavioral science unit for a profile, but that profile came while they were trying to go after Pietro and it didn't fit him, so they didn't use it.
Ah.
The profile stated he was sexually impotent, 40 to 45 years old, lived with an elderly relative or alone, wore the same clothes each time he killed, was right-handed, that he hated women, clearly, that he was weak or at least not confident in his ability to control the victims, which is why it was like this ambush style. He would wait until they were having sex.
Right.
And that he may have been cannibalizing the pieces he took from the women. After his death, 2 men who knew him were instead picked up. These were Giancarlo Lotti and Mario Vanni. Mario had been a witness against Pietro in those first criminal proceedings, and he'd called them, he was like, we're just picnic companions, and that became, the compagna di merenda became like a saying and like worked its way into vocabulary there because he'd said it. I assume that meant we were like light friends. We just got together a little once in a while, you know. I think that's what he was trying to say. But anyway,
well,
I never did find an actual translation. He said he'd witnessed Pietro and Giancarlo committing the 1985 murder. Both these men were convicted. They're still in jail to this day. Many believe them to be innocent scapegoats. Astoundingly, the same guy who had pursued them and Pietro, Michel Guttieri, became chief inspector for a police unit called GIDES, and that stood for Gruppo Investigativo Delitti Seriali, or the Investigative Group for Serial Crimes. Even after he got the last 2 men convicted, he kept going. And in 2001, he declared they'd been part of a cult, so there were more people to get.
Satanic panic.
Yes, yep. Giancarlo, one of the last 2 men convicted, had said there was a doctor who had hired Pietro to kill women and bring him their genitalia for satanic rituals. So Guttieri said he'd found a stone near where Pietro had worked, which indicated cult activity, but the press was like, but dude, those are doorstops around here. Everybody uses those as doorstops. So it's not cult activity. Didn't matter. So nobody else is really taking him seriously, but he's like, he's all in on this.
Oh, good God. So
suddenly accusations were being thrown at physicians, a pharmacist, that they were part of a satanic secret society. The pharmacist Francesco Calamandre was arrested and tried. Again, there's already 2 men in prison, but they only convicted him of like 5 or 6 of the couple murders, like not all of them. Anyway, this pharmacist arrested and tried. He was found innocent. A deceased physician, Francesco Narducci, was exhumed to see if evidence could be found that he'd been part of it.
Oh my God.
Like, what did they expect? The body's been processed.
Yeah.
Anyway, none was. Maybe they were looking for his DNA. I don't know. Along with Guttieri now were the new chief prosecutor, Perugia Giuliano Mignini, and a magazine editor named Gabriella Carlizzi. They were actively pursuing the satanic cult theory with him. This was a mission. In the meantime, a journalist who had been involved from the second crime forward, one Mario Spezzi, was working on a book with Douglas Preston of the Preston and Child thriller writing duo about the Monster of Florence. And, by the way, Spezzi was the one who gave him that moniker. The rest of the press picked it up. You see, Preston had moved into a house in Italy. There's a whole Atlantic article, if you want to read it, about his experiences behind the scenes with this, because shit gets crazy with him too. So anyway, he and his family had moved to Italy, and he discovered that right across the street is where the 2 German men had been murdered.
Okay.
Because there was like a orchard or something across the street. And so, of course, he's fascinated. Well, this is what he writes about. And so he starts looking into it. He meets Spezzi. They join forces and start investigating it on their own because the police are making such a cock-up of it. And then they wrote a book about it. It is available. People can go read it. It's like just called The Monster of Florence or something like that. It came out in Italy first, then in America. Spezzi and Preston ended up with Mignini coming after them, saying they were obstructing justice. That was just one of the charges, but it was all along that point. Because Spezzi was giving interviews and floating completely different theories than the satanic cult theory. Before his arrest, Spezzi had discovered his car broken into and damaged. The window broken, shattered one morning. When he took it to a mechanic, the mechanic discovered surveillance equipment that had been put into his vehicle by the police. They were tapping his phone and otherwise observing him. Finally, they came into his house and searched it thoroughly, taking all his research materials and the book he and Preston were writing. Happily, Preston had moved to Maine by this time, back in the U.S. on the coast, so they'd been emailing the book back and forth, so they didn't get the book all the way.
Right.
It was not lost. Came out. Ton of success for both of them.
Well, and this doesn't hurt.
No.
This kind of publicity.
This is perfect publicity.
Yes. Oh my God.
With Mignini and Guattari claiming Spezzi was part of the satanic cult and trying to cover for them, Spezzi was arrested. It might be Spizzi. There's only one Z. And Preston can never return to Italy or he risks being prosecuted.
Wow.
Someone woke up and started paying attention, and eventually Spezzi was set free, and Guattari and Mignini were indicted on charges of abuse of office.
Good.
Their police force terrifies me. Their court system appears to be a little better.
So, did the killing stop?
Yep, the French couple were the last one. The GIDES no longer exists, and the case is considered closed with the two men who were imprisoned after Pietro died. In other words, the case is still unsolved, really, probably.
Yeah. Wow.
Along came a new journalist in 2017 named Francesco Amacone, who decided to look into the case himself, believing, like so many others, that the two men in prison had nothing to do with the crimes. He developed a theory that the Monster of Florence was the same man as the U.S.'s Zodiac Killer, who had suddenly stopped his reign of terror in the U.S. right before the crimes in Italy began. He also discovered a suspect who he claims admitted to the crimes, but when the journalist turned him in, he denied everything. The suspect is one Joseph or Giuseppe Bevilacqua, who many knew as Giuseppe. He was born in New Jersey in 1935, went into the army, and when he got out, at about the same time the Zodiac Killer stopped his killings, Bevilacqua moved to Florence. The year was 1974, meaning he could not have committed the first murder, but could have committed all the following ones, which would leave Stefano Mele, the man originally convicted of killing his wife and her lover, as the culprit in that murder still. Right. The theory is that he was a CID investigator, which he has now posted proof, in the U.S. Army, and that when he'd moved to Florence, he'd still been an investigator for the Army at first, or he'd been there on an investigation and then moved there. It was stated that he must have gotten access to the files for the 1968 murders and replaced the bullet casings with casings matching his own gun, so that when he went on his subsequent killing sprees, they couldn't connect him to the crimes because he hadn't been in Italy in 1968. Supposedly, his confession was September 11th, 2017. He maintains his innocence. This journalist is actively going after him. It's all over the internet.
Wow.
There's a Reddit with this long rambling, but I believe the journalist is Italian, so it's been, you can tell probably it's not English first language, still very good, but, you know. If you want to go read his rambling shit, there's so much more to it than what I'm saying. It's on Reddit. Authorities did collect his DNA in 2020, but there was nothing else in the news about what happened after that. So I'm assuming it didn't match. In 2021, the investigation against Bevilacqua was closed. He filed a lawsuit for defamation against the journalist. Despite the defamation case and the closing of that case, Amacone has continued, just like I said, online, all over the internet. He has a lot of interesting evidence, including proof that Bevilacqua was CID and investigate a major case called the Khaki Mafia, involving corrupt officers in the army in Vietnam. The investigation took place in San Francisco and Vietnam and ended just before the Zodiac killings began. Looking through some of the information he has posted, there are some tight turnarounds and a lot of implying things they're not on the record. It's because the CID kept them off the record. Personally, I think that though the crimes were similar and that they involved couples shot to death on lovers' lanes, there were some very distinctive things about the Zodiac Killer, like the hood and the sign that he was using and the codes and all that shit that's still not broken. Yeah. Why wouldn't he continue the code thing at the very least? He loved taunting the cops with this shit.
Or coming up with a new code.
And why not taunt anybody until that very last murder?
That doesn't make any sense.
So, anyway. I do find it likely that there was a serial killer, not a Sardinian sect, not a satanic cult. It's a very classic.
Yeah.
thing. It's sexually motivated. And anyway, it's just so textbook serial killer. And the fact that they kept thinking, no, it's a group of men. It's like, no, it's not a group of men.
It's really not.
I figure if Stefano Mele had lost it, there were many other lovers he would have had to kill. Like, was it he just lost it and shot the one couple? And what about his son being in the car? What a piece of shit. And why would you take your son and drop him off in the middle of instead of just taking him home where he would have woken up then in his bed and then you could have been like, no, that was a dream. You know, like,
right.
With a 6-year-old, why would you leave your 6-year-old?
That makes no sense.
That part bothered me. I was like, I don't.
But why was the 6-year-old there?
Okay, so they had gone out to a movie and she frequently, because she didn't see anything wrong with what she was doing. So the 3 of them, her lover and her son, they went to a movie. And then they were driving and the boy had fallen asleep in the back seat. And so then they decided to pull over and have sex in the car.
Ew.
With the child's like, yes.
Big ew.
Okay. Yes. So anyway, and the other dude was a father to 3. Let's have sex in front of your child.
But he didn't at least bring them with him.
Well, yeah. So, you know, in the typical fashion of serial killers, the question is always, why did they suddenly stop? Did somebody get imprisoned for something else? Did they die?
Right.
And the thing is, we have seen now with Joseph D'Angelo, it's thrown everything into turmoil because he did legitimately just stop as far as anybody knows. He just stopped. And so that is always possible too. And just those cases are very similar because it was escalating, and then stop.
Huh.
So anyway, in 2022, the daughter of Nadine Moreau, one of the last victims, began petitioning for the case to be reopened due to police incompetence. An attorney named Walter Biscotti, his name is Biscotti for reals, has been hired by her and 2 other family members of victims to seek, I think the 2 others are Carmela's kids or something like that, to seek justice in these cases, or relatives. He feels that a man named Giampiero Vigilante, I don't know how you say that in Italian, but the last name is Vigilante, was involved, and states that police found signs of involvement in the 1980s when they searched his house. But then I was like, okay, they were super willing to take a tiny piece of circumstantial evidence and convict people, but they found evidence in this guy's house and didn't try to convict him.
And didn't do anything with it.
So I didn't get that. And this person was friends with Pietro and those other 2 that got... So anyway, it said that there was evidence he was obsessed with the case. But...
So are you.
So we're waiting to see if that goes anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big ball of wax.
Yeah.
That's just... Damn.
The government stuff, though, it's like... I read so much stuff about them. I was like, I can't put this in here. I can't. Like,
well, and you start to, cause you probably do it like I do. You start going, oh, I have to include this detail and this detail. And all of a sudden you look up and you're like 12 pages later, you're like, well, I don't have that much time.
I'm going to delete all of this.
I am not writing a book. So then I've written them and I have to go back through and I say, what can I delete that the story still makes sense? It's so hard sometimes. This one is not.
All right, good.
This one is not that complicated. So, there are people of a certain age, and it probably applies to younger people as well, who once upon a time, they knew people who never left the house without a bottle of Visine in their possession. Mm-hmm. So, you know the old slogan.
Okay, well, it was pot smokers in my day, but okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I was trying to work up to that. I was trying to be a little bit subtle.
All right, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Shannon. But
why would you try and be subtle in my presence?
I don't know. Why would I try to be subtle? But remember the slogan, Visine, it gets the red out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And people carried Visine because smoking pot could make your eyes look like piss holes in the snow. That's a direct quote. I'm not going to tell you from who. So, I don't use Visine because I have an eye doctor who's like, don't use that stuff.
I wear contacts, so I can't.
Yeah, use eye wetting drops. Uh-huh. They have they're called artificial tears. They're fabulous things. Because when you get old, everything dries out. Pretty much your skin, your hair, your liver. That could be just me. Your eyes. So I don't think about Visine on a daily basis.
No?
Why would I? I don't.
Every morning I get up and ruminate on Visine.
Is that your mantra when you meditate?
It gets the red out.
Visine. So today, I think if my eyes are red, it is a signal to the public. It's a public service announcement. Get the fuck out of my way.
Right.
So some people think of eye drops completely differently, like as in a method of killing people.
Yes.
Because I didn't realize.
I learned that from CSI, but I researched it to make sure it was real because I know that.
I'm going to mention CSI.
Okay.
Lana Clayton. She was a nurse in South Carolina who met Steve Clayton in 2010, married him in 2013. This was her second marriage, and his relatives, who loved him dearly, they were not saying this as a slam, but this was his 6th or 7th marriage. They weren't certain. He loved to be in love, but they kind of described him as a big goof. And so
at least it wasn't mean.
Yes. He had created a very successful business. And I want to say it was a physical therapy business. He wasn't a physical therapist, but he had created this business and grew it. He made so much money, he fully retired at the age of 40.
Nice.
Right? In 2016. And what's funny is when you're reading about this comes up much later. I put it chronologically where it belonged. In 2016, so they've been married for 3 years, there was a mysterious incident at their home. Lana accidentally shot her husband in the head with a crossbow while he was sleeping.
It's like that song from Chicago.
What song?
It's just like I shot him accidentally. Or I think he ran into my knife. Their whole thing is each of them being like, yeah, I killed him, but...
Because, don't you have a loaded crossbow in your bedroom? That you take
that may be next.
Okay.
So,
that you take out and play with and playfully point at your husband while he's sleeping.
No.
So, they both said it was an accident. I have no idea how they pulled that shit
There
off.
are so many, though. There are so many crimes where the wife does something and the guy's like, no, it's okay. I know she didn't mean to. And he doesn't want her to get in trouble.
So, the injury was minor and the police didn't pursue it. Flash forward. Lana claims she found her husband dead at the bottom of the stairs in their home on July 21st, 2018. This is just 2 years later. So she flees the house and flags down a passing motorcyclist. I read the interview with him, which is kind of hilarious because he's like, well, you see a woman screaming across the lawn. You're a good person. You stop. You try to help. But he was like, I don't know why she flagged me down. That's not most people's first instinct. Look, there's a friendly motorcyclist.
Right.
So anyhow, she begged him to call 911 because she thought her husband was dead. And then she runs to the neighbor's house. So this cracked me up. This one detail. The neighbor jumps in his golf cart and takes her back to the house. And I'm like, what the fuck kind of neighborhood is it?
Oh, it's that kind of neighborhood.
Yeah. So he drives her back to the house in his golf cart, he goes up into the house and finds her husband dead at the base of the stairs. Apparently her husband, Steve Clayton, had fallen ill 3 days earlier, suffering from vertigo, serious enough that he was bedridden. If any of you have ever suffered from vertigo, it sucks in a very major way.
Yeah.
It suckety sucks.
It does.
And it was later learned, it came out that his sister, Rosie Clayton Leslie, had been trying to call him during this whole time, during these 3 days, and he never answered. And it was apparently he was known, he was one of those guys, he always had his phone on him. His wife, Lana, who, let me reemphasize, was a nurse, was very attentive to him during this time, bringing him water, fluffing his pillows, making sure he had everything he needed before she went out to mow the lawn. Now, this was her story. She wasn't attentive enough that she would take him to the bathroom because he'd apparently been pissing the bed for 3 days. His nephews were horrified to discover this. Anyway.
And she was the nurse, reiterating.
Yes. So when the police arrived, they did not suspect foul play and told her not to blame herself. Because she was all, I just went outside to mow the lawn and I came back in and he was at the bottom of the stairs. And if I'd been in here with him, he wouldn't have fallen. The deputy coroner also did not suspect foul play. But Steve's nephew, Nick French, thought he saw some red flags. Nick was a local police officer, not in that town, but, one of the neighboring towns. So first of all, there were 2 phones in the house. So why had she fled and flagged down a stranger to call 911?
To make it look good.
Second, as a nurse, why wasn't she performing CPR? I mean, I understand.
If it had just happened and you're a nurse, you're going to perform CPR.
I understand for a lot of people, if you walk in the house and find your spouse collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, your first instinct might be to freak out. I'm not buying that for a nurse.
No, they've usually seen some shit.
I've usually seen a lot of shit.
And she, again, wouldn't let him be lying in his own piss for 3 days.
Exactly.
That's not how that's literally her job.
Yeah. So, Steve's phone, which was always with him, they never found it. It wasn't on him. It wasn't in his pajama pocket, his nightstand. Couldn't find his phone. So, the police are asking her, because everybody's being very nice to her. Of course, her husband has just passed away. So they said, do you know what funeral home you would like us to take the body to? And she was just all, I've never thought about this. I have no idea what to do. She kept saying, I don't know what to do. Fun fact that not everybody knows, and I believe it differs by where you are, but in some places it's law. You can't put a dead body in an ambulance. You have to put it in a hearse. It can't be transported by ambulance. Now, if they die in the ambulance, that's one thing. But there are some places you can't.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, it depends on where you... Yeah.
But there.
So, that I'm not sure of. But when she... So they said, she was told, the police said, we can take the body to the morgue until you figure out what you want to do. And her nephew said that would be a good idea because then they can perform more tests. And suddenly she comes up with the name of the closest funeral home and says, let's take him there and cremate him. Like, can we do it right now?
Right this second.
She later tried to say that Steve had become a drug addict and she didn't want any testing done.
Oh.
Yeah. He was doing drugs and he didn't want his family to find out through a talk screen. She didn't want Nick to notify any family members, and he finally just walked away. He went up the stairs to his room so he could have quiet to call his brother, to call Steve's sister. That's where he realized that his uncle had been in bed for several days, because I guess it was obvious that... Well, yes, and plus it had been pissed on in. So they're like, how did he get to if he'd been in bedridden, how did he get to the top of the stairs? And I do want to point out that any one of these things individually could probably be explained away.
He got enough strength to crawl to the top of the stairs.
Yes,
or,
whatever. So, when another nephew named Chris Fagan arrived, there were more red flags. She said she didn't know what to do. And Chris said, well, let's take a look at the will. That's where he put his last wishes. That'll tell us what he wanted to have done. And Lana said, there is no will. And Chris said, yeah, there is, dude. I've seen it because I'm the executor. But she continued to deny it. That was her. There is no will. I mean, she yelled, there is no will. Get out of my house. She refused the nephew's help. So the next day, on Sunday, the two nephews got together with their wives. Like the one went to the other one's house. And they walked in and they just looked at each other and said, something ain't right. And their wives are like, you're damn straight, something ain't right. They called the coroner's office and begged them to do an autopsy because that was on a Sunday. The cremation was scheduled for Monday. They got the autopsy done. So his heart was fine. There was no heart attack. But the talk screen showed large amounts of tetrahydrozoline, which there was some ad campaign. I don't know if it was Visine or one of the others, but I remember that I can hear the guy's voice in my head saying, tetrahydrozoline. And he's got some big pointer and he's, Anyway, the coroner had to look it up because the coroner kind of went, well, what the fuck is this? And why is there so much of it? And what does it do in large amounts? Yeah. So it's harmless in eye drops applied topically.
Sure.
But just a few drops can cause nausea, vomiting, reduced heart rate, along with dizziness and confusion. And in large amounts, respiratory depression. So, this has been used in CSI. It was used
in the Vegas one.
It was used in Wedding Crashers. It was used in a movie called I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. Have you seen that? Oh my God. It was also apparently used in Orange is the New Black. And I'm just going to tell you, don't think that this is funny and a good thing to do, because it just so happened after I had this all written up and done, I'd even already printed it. I turned on the TV last night and what's on? Wedding Crashers. And he pours like a bottle, like half a bottle. And I'm like,
which would actually just quite murder.
Yeah, you've just killed Bradley Cooper. You didn't make him sick. So anyway, what a shocker in the media. It's misportrayed.
Well, yeah.
In fiction. So now Lana claims that Steve put 2 drops in his coffee every morning to keep him regular.
Oh, Jesus.
Like, bitch, please. I don't think so. But during questioning, she confessed. Then she went back to the mansion and tried to kill herself. She was taken into custody, was eventually charged with murder, found guilty, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Okay, now that's kind of important. She was charged, found guilty, sentenced. She's in prison. 3 weeks later, just 12 miles away, just over the border in Mount Holly, North Carolina, 32-year-old wife and mom Stacy Hunsucker was found dead by her husband, Joshua Hunsucker. Once again, heart failure was the initial suspected cause of death. These two had been high school sweethearts. For fuck's sake, don't ever marry your childhood sweetheart or your high school sweetheart.
Liar. I married my high school sweetheart.
Yeah, you did. It worked for you. But so many times you see people go back to their high school sweetheart many years later, and it's just a big, big mess. So they'd been high school sweethearts. They'd been married 8 years, had 2 little kids. She was a preschool teacher. I mean, you hear the Hallmark movie music swelling in the background. He was a paramedic, but he was also the flight medic at a Charlotte, North Carolina hospital. And Stacy did have a history of heart problems and had a pacemaker. What happened was she dies. Everybody assumes it's her heart. When Stacy's mother heard that Josh had started the process to receive $250,000 from 2 fairly new life insurance policies on Stacy, she got mad. And then she called the North Carolina Department of Insurance to investigate. Part of this, I didn't know there was such a thing, but there is. An investigation was opened, but Josh had, guess what? Had Stacy cremated. So there were no remains to test, he thought. But Stacy had been an organ donor. By the way, if you're not an organ donor, do become one.
Sure.
I'm all for that.
I am.
A vial of blood had been collected and stored. So there were remains. There was this one vial of blood because she was an organ donor. This could, if it doesn't save a life, it could help convict your murderer. Think of it that way. So they test it, and the investigators find high levels of tetrahydrozoline.
There you go.
I keep wanting to say dextromethorphan. I don't know why. Just because it flows off the tongue.
Oh,
so he was charged with murder. But he has not been to trial yet. As of January 8th of this year, the trial hasn't begun, and the lawyers are arguing about change of venue and whether all of the prosecution's evidence has been shared. Because apparently the prosecution is saying, we have submitted every file, and if X or Y becomes available, we will certainly give it to you. But right now, there are no more files to get. It's all hinging on the definition of the word file. And should he he did lose his job, and his babysitter ratted him out that he was having an affair with a woman he worked with.
Good.
So that one is still churning through the courts. Last but not least, 2018, I don't know what was going on, but it was a really big year for eye drops. On October 3rd, so just a few months later, on October 3rd, Jesse R. Krasuski, that's how we're pronouncing it, called 911 in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, to report that her friend, 62-year-old Lynn Hernan, was unresponsive and not breathing. When the police responded, she told the responding officers that she thought her friend had been suicidal because of her failing health. And police did find Hernan in a recliner next to her table is full of prescription bottles, and there are crumbs of what appeared to be crushed medication on her chest. So it was ruled a drug overdose. 3 months later, however, the case was reopened when the Waukesha County medical examiner, Dr. Linda there's too many consonants.
Yeah.
Beardrazicki.
Also, I'm trying to remember. Because of Waukesha. I think it said Waukesha. Because I kept saying Waukesha. And then it was the girls, the Slender Man girls. I think
Waukesha?
It's Waukesha, but I could be remembering.
Waukesha. It's still that county in Wisconsin.
Right. Yes.
So anyhow, this Dr. Linda, the medical examiner, got the toxicology report back, and there was a fatal amount of tetrahydrozoline in the woman's system. So in September of 2019, the case was ruled a homicide. When confronted by police, Jessie initially denied any knowledge of how the eye drops could have gotten into Hernan's system. She later said that Hernan bought cases of eye drops and mixed them with vodka and drank them. I don't know why, because there is no buzz. There's no enhanced effect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't...
So no.
No. That didn't make sense. She later said she gave her a couple of drops to help her sleep, but then she later allegedly, because again, this one is still churning its way through the system, she later allegedly confessed that she had poured 6 bottles of eye drops into Hernan's water bottle to help her self-terminate.
Okay. But it's not actually like a pleasant way to go because you feel crappy first. So nobody would do that to self-terminate.
No. I can't
Especially
imagine.
not if they had a bedside or a chairside table covered in drugs that probably they could have OD'd
that
on.
they could have taken, and So in addition to the homicide, Jessie stands charged with defrauding Hernan of approximately $300,000 and blowing the money. And she took her friends to the spa. She bought expensive stuff. She gambled. So that case is also waiting to come to trial. But I do want to point out that someone in one of, I can't even remember where it was, but in one of these, someone reached out to the Visine company for a statement. Because I'm telling people, you know how it is.
It's funny that I can't get Sudafed without a ration of shit, but I can buy Visine anywhere.
You could buy a case of Visine off of Amazon tomorrow if you wanted. You could probably go to Costco and buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So Visine issued a statement and said, this drug is perfectly safe, used as directed.
Yeah.
It's been used, this has been proven through 50 years of topical application, and the bottle says not to ingest it.
Right. They've done what they can. You can't make people not murder people.
That is correct. But they're just like, yeah, so it's poisonous. So. But I had never, so I've been, you're the only person I've talked to who knew about this. I come trotting up the stairs. Joe must just live in constant bewilderment about what's going to come out of my mouth next. I walk up the stairs and go, did you know Visine was poisonous? And his response was, well, I never used more than a drop or two in my eyes, and I never felt compelled to drink it. And I was like, but here's the thing. Here's the other thing. I'm surprised it isn't used more often.
Side eyes, Joe. Pours Visine into it. Yeah.
It is odorless and tasteless.
Yeah.
So I saw some friends last night, both of who were right early, and they didn't know about it. And one of them said, I needed a poison. And I went, does Deb know?
There's a whole encyclopedia that does stuff from Agatha Christie, because she was it's not called a pharmacist there, but she was qualified for that stuff.
Chemist.
Yeah. And so she knew that stuff, and she put that in her books. There's a whole thing about how she used stuff in her books. Use that if you need a poison.
Yeah.
It probably covers the majority of poisons.
And I think that what was specific was that he needed it to act within a certain time.
Right.
That was his
that
problem.
Would be in that. I'm recommending that to everybody. I don't remember what it's called, but look it up.
So once again, I have to thank my True Crime a Day calendar that brought one of these to my attention. CBS News, Forbes, WCNC, a North Carolina news station, and the ABC News.
I have to do mine because I didn't do my sources.
I
Wikipedia, Reddit, list first. The Monster of Florence, a true crime story by Douglas Preston in The Atlantic. If anybody wants to look that up, it's very interesting because, again, it's about the shit that was happening in the background. All that's interesting in true crime press. Nothing trustworthy there at all. I'm not going to lie.
So, my advice is that you think twice with your over-the-counter medications and what you're doing with them.
I mean, you should never be using your shit on somebody else anyway.
That's very true.
Right there, that cuts it all off.
Just stop trying to kill people, please.
Unless there's a good reason.
Yeah, but because they're copulating in a car, not a good reason.
Even if they're having their 200th affair, not a good reason.
No.
So, all right. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, you can check us out on buymeacoffee.com/mmmayhem.
I think that's it.
All right, good day.
Oh my God. We'll talk to you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.